And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again, and this time we are looking at the very last overhead or review video in my ongoing series till the Fabled end, and with that today we are looking at Fables Oversized Hardcover Volume 16. This hadn't even been announced when I started this video series. It's a very recent hardcover and it's come out about a decade or so after the last Fables comic from the mainline Fables series. But hey, let's jump into it and let's do an overview of the final hardcover in my collection. So, to start off with, written by Bill Willingham, it's a Fables hardcover, deluxe edition, book 16. As you can see, it's all very much in keeping with the existing previous style, Once Upon a Time, then a bit of blurb, and this is the image on the dust jacket. Now, the first thing I've got to point out is the elephant in the room. This is DC Black Label, as opposed to DC Vertigo. So immediately, this volume is not going to line up perfectly on my shelf with all the other ones in my collection, because they all say Vertigo at the bottom, and this just has the modern and contemporary DC branding, because it's a situation where when this was published, Vertigo had been discontinued as an imprint, and we moved over to DC Black Label, whatever that was. Frankly, I found that a bit confusing, and I found several Black Label titles a bit irritating. I didn't really understand why they shifted from Vertigo to Black Label, and evidently neither did DC, because they've now moved back and they're now resurrecting the Vertigo branding. So that's annoying. I'm hoping there's going to be a second reprint of this, and that second printing will have the Vertigo branding, in which case I might well pick that up and swap it out so it looks better on my shelf. But just a bit of a frustration I wanted to share with all of you. Inside, we've got the usual purple end pages, and of course, we have the usual end leaves. So we've got the usual pull quotes, we've got a thing by Bill Willingham, and then here we have the hardcover with the exact same image there. This is the new antagonist for the series. So if you remember, the first 15 volumes went through a kind of ebb and flow of different antagonists, and I am going to give spoilers here, so this is your spoiler warning. I'm going to give a spoiler for who the main antagonist is in this volume, where that is shown in the first page or two, literally, is identified there. But I'm also going to very briefly touch on the antagonist from the main overarching 15 series. So this is your spoiler warning. If you don't want to know who the antagonists were, the twists were for the last 15 volumes, then skip forward by about 60 seconds. Okay, so in the previous volumes, we had the main antagonist for the first 70-odd issues was, of course, the Emperor, or Geppetto, and at that point, we then moved over into kind of like a bit of a vacillation in terms of the series, trying to work out who the next big enemy was going to be, and then it was Mr. Dark, and then after he was vanquished, we then got into this slightly weird dynamic between Snow White and Rose Red for the last volume or two. This is now set subsequently after that, and the main antagonist is Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. Now, let's have a quick look on the inside, and then I'll talk about why it's Peter Pan and why in a lot of ways that isn't really a plot twist, or that's slightly inevitable. So what we have here is, as you can see, this is issues 151 to 162. Fables Deluxe Edition Book 16. It came out in May this year, in fact, and I'm filming this in October 2024. We have the table of contents, introduction by Lee Lofbridge, who is actually the colorist, and then the Black Forest and 12 issues there. 1 to 12, pretty straightforward. So it starts off where the previous series ended. Oh, the introduction is literally just that. So doesn't really add much or take much away. So it starts off literally where the last series ended, where the town of Fabletown has now been exposed to the real human world. It has Peter Pan there, it has Tinkerbell, and they identify themselves literally on the second panel of the comic. Now, the reason it's interesting that Peter Pan is the antagonist is really contingent on some real world knowledge you may or may not have about the Fable series. So Bill Willingham and Mark Buckingham famously said that originally they had hoped and intended for the Emperor from the original run, and I won't say who that is again, but the Emperor and the Emperor's secret identity was originally meant to be Peter Pan. But the reason they weren't able to do Peter Pan was because Peter Pan at that point still wasn't in the public domain. And so as a result, they were kind of like, well, we can't use Peter Pan the same way we can use like Snow White or the Three Little Pigs or that sort of stuff. And so instead they settled on the antagonist and the reveal that they had of the Emperor's real identity, which they chose, which frankly worked out really, really well. But I always felt it was a bit of a missed opportunity, well, not even a missed opportunity, it was just a bit of a shame they didn't have the opportunity to use Peter Pan and to use Tinkerbell, simply because I think Peter Pan and the mythos around Peter Pan is really, really rich and ripe for a lot of mining of that sort of creative vein in terms of what's going on. Well, fast forward to 2024, Peter Pan is now in the public domain from J.M. Barrie's estate, and so they can use Pan and Tinkerbell. And if you really know anything about Peter Pan and kind of the mythos behind the Pan character, we're really talking about kind of an elder god kind of character. There's a lot of literature you can read about Peter Pan and kind of theories about it and stuff. What I would say is I actually studied J.M. Barrie's work as part of my English literature qualification when I got my degree. So I know quite a lot about it. So I was quite excited to see how it was done here. It's done okay. It's done okay. So then what we have here is really just a conventional but good Fable story. It's framed in the normal way, so the usual kind of quite rigorous panels with the patterned edging all the way through. It's really about the wolf cubs, so Bigby's children with Snow White. The artwork is very, very in keeping with all the previous issues that we've read. The storyline is very much in keeping with all the previous ones that we've read. That said, actually, this thread never really gets picked up, I think. It shows an interesting kind of post-Fables world. By that I mean sort of post-Fables 1 to 150 world, where the mundanes are aware of magic, they're aware of Fables. They set up their own kind of magic version of the CIA to try to hunt and police Fables. Cinderella's involved in that, and of course, I love Cinderella. Yeah, it's just a good, solid story. This was a really enjoyable Fable story. Do you have to read it after you've read the first 15 volumes? No, the first 15 volumes end with a really nice bit of closure. But if you can pick this up and you're a Fables fan, you'll be a fan of this. If you love Fables, you'll love this. It's that simple. It continues the story on really well. It also continues on sort of investigating the wolf cubs and the various things that they get up to, but not in a way that messes with all the foreshadowing from the latter volumes of Fables. So in the latter volumes of Fables, there's a few flash forwards of who Ambrose, one of the wolf cubs, has married, and what's happened in the lives of some of the other wolf cubs, and that all comes to pass here as well. There's nothing here which is a inconsistency. There's nothing here which kind of clashes with what we've already established. All this does is just flesh out the story more and more, and it's good. It's good writing. As you can see here, the art and even the cover art is exactly in keeping with what you expect from Fables. The storyline is exactly kind of tempo and kind of mythic fable type storyline of taking existing fairy tale and storytelling elements and then kind of weaving it in a new way. It's really interesting seeing Cinderella working at the Pentagon. You've got Peter Pan and Tinkerbell and their slightly dysfunctional relationship. Although I will say, I feel they did underuse Peter Pan. It would have been better had he been... I don't know, I guess it would have been better to see more of him, have a much longer narrative arc. Only having 12 issues from start to dispatch just felt like kind of undercut how good he could have been. But I can't blame anyone for that. That's literally due to the fact that Peter Pan wasn't in the public domain and couldn't have been used for something like this. Yeah, so I just wanted to do an overview here. Oddly enough, I haven't seen any overviews like this on the internet of this, even though... You know, it only came out a little while ago, and every YouTuber and their dog is always desperate to get content, so I'm really surprised that this hasn't been kind of done as an overview already. But then, I guess no one's done a volume-by-volume overview like my channel either. Like I say, it continues, it's really good. If you're a Fables fan, you are going to love this. If you're not a Fables fan, you're not going to love this. This is just the 16th volume in the series, well worth having to your collection. And this is the standard cover gallery features at the end. And again, the usual kind of Vertigo cover gallery bit. The only quibble I have with this, the only thing that annoys me is the fact that it's not Vertigo. That is Black Label, and that is not going to look good on my shelf. That is just going to look annoying. But yeah, otherwise, Fables, volume 16. A nice epilogue volume, set way after volume 15. Really enjoyable, good art, good writing, and a good return to form. That takes us there. We are going to have one more video. There's no homework for it, but next week what I'll do, I'll just do a quick overview of my thoughts of the entirety of my Fables hardcover collection and sort of the Fables universe. And we might even talk a little bit about Bill Willingham and some of the more recent interesting revelations to come from him in the last 12 months about Fables and working with DC and possibly the future of the franchise. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next week. Until then, stay classy.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.